please.
Karen Kahn, Bruce Miller,
Here.
John Clark,
Here.
Patricia Griffin,
Here.
Dolores Johnson, Kirk Martin,
Here.
Scott Tracy.
Here.
And do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Public comment. This is the time for public comment on non-agenda items. Do we have any speaker slips?
No speaker slips.
Okay. Notices. That the lease review subcommittee meeting scheduled for Thursday, June 11th was canceled, and that on Thursday, June 11th at 4 p.m. the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at Airport Administration. Moves us to the consent calendar. No objections. We'll waive the reading. Do we have any items to be removed from the consent calendar?
Move for approval?
Second. All in favor of approving the consent calendar?
Aye.
Opposed? The consent calendar is approved. And that takes us to the liaison reports. Do we have any of our city liaisons? All right. Well, then I guess that moves us along to the administrative reports. The financial year 2009-2010 airport commercial industrial lease rates. We have a presentation.
Yes, we do. Rebecca Fribley will give you a presentation on our property management program as well as proposed lease rates for the next year.
Thank you. The Business and Property Program manages the airport's fixed assets. That includes commercial, industrial, and aviation uses, and 97% of the airport revenue is derived from property rentals. Commercial industrial revenue for fiscal year 2009, our goal was $3,840,000, and we anticipate that we are going to either achieve or exceed that goal. And I skipped our mission statement. So our mission for the program is to manage the fixed assets to ensure the airport's self-sufficiency and maintain a strong financial position through prudent fiscal management practices. This gives you an idea of the different sources of our lease revenue. Commercial industrial leases are 34% of the total income. The largest slice of the pie is the terminal concession rentals, which include our ground transportation services, rental cars, and parking, as well as the gift shop and the restaurant and all the other associated things in the terminal, like the ATM, that are not directly related to commercial airline services. We also receive about 10% of our revenues from general aviation leases, such as the FBOs, the maintenance operations, flight schools, and those sorts of services. We currently have 128 tenants and manage 160 agreements, including the aforementioned terminal-related leases and concessions, the general aviation agreements, and the commercial industrial leases. The FAA requires that the airport maintain its rentals at market rate. This is one of our grant assurances. And we establish those rates annually based on a number of criteria, including the UCSB economic forecast data, the real estate and economic outlook data, local real estate comparables, and when we have current appraisals, we also use current appraisals. The state of the economy. Local commercial real estate market has seen a reduction in rental rates. We have been getting notices from various commercial real estate companies showing that properties that they currently have on the market are being reduced in terms of the rates. The CPI has gone into negative numbers for the first time since I've been at the airport. But fortunately, the airport has a very diverse group of tenants. In addition to our aviation-related tenants, we have a number of tenants who are either actual government entities like federal government, the FAA, the TSA, the State of California Department of Justice, Fish and Game, those sorts of tenants. We also have a number of tenants that have government contracts, Defense Department contracts, Department of Energy contracts, also utilities such as Southern California Edison that are very stable tenants and really provide us with a good basis for our revenue. We also have a number of construction-related or contractor types of uses. We have everything from impound yards to a steel yard, motorcycle shop, tire store, the golf course, the Dodge dealership. So that diversity really puts us in a fairly good position in terms of if we take a hit in one sector of the economy, other sectors remain stable enough so that we have a pretty solid basis for our revenue. Impacts to the airport. Some of our tenants have had satellite businesses here. They have their primary business in Ventura or Lompoc or Santa Maria. But if they do a significant amount of business on the South Coast, they take a yard or an office space here because they know they're going to have a crew here for 6 months to a year. A lot of those tenants have decided that they needed to consolidate their enterprises and have moved off airport back to wherever their main business site is. We've had a slight increase in our delinquent accounts. Last year, for the most part, we had approximately 3 tenants a month that were behind in their rent a little bit. This year, it's been closer to 5 to 6 tenants per month. We have had some requests from tenants for rental abatement, and we have taken a look at the way that we adjust our rentals, our methodology, what's being done in the industry, and have come to the conclusion that one of the things that we needed to do is increase our marketing of airport properties. We've done that primarily by providing signage. There's still a lot of confusion among some folks in the area as to where the area north of Hollister actually is located. It's commonly perceived to be in Goleta. So people have a misinformation about who they should call and where they should call. So we did post some signs, and they have resulted in an increased number of inquiries about the properties. Ironically, they also increased the perception among some of the tenants that since we had not previously posted signs that the airport was getting desperate and resulted in some additional inquiries about reducing rentals. One of the solutions that we've come up with for some of the tenants who have been adversely affected in their businesses, and primarily those tenants are either tenants that are in some way connected with the fuel industry, the trucking companies, the flight schools, the Dodge dealership. We have been able to accommodate them by reducing their premises. If they're not using all of the premises, we can reduce their premises, and that allows them to reduce their rent for whatever period of time they need to do that. When we took a look at the CPI index, historically, we found that over the previous 5 years, the average CPI increase was 3.8%, and over a 10-year basis, it was 3.4%. And based on that and inquiries with other airports, where the CPI is still being used basically as the measurement for adjustment of rental rates, we feel that our current rates range of no less than 3%, no more than 8%, is still industry standard and still justified. So we're not recommending that we change the adjustment policy at this time. We also took a look at our procedures for collecting delinquent rent, and we believe those are still appropriate. Essentially, we call the tenant once it's been established that they are in the area of 5 days late, and we discuss it with them. Following that, if they continue to be unable to pay and the payments go delinquent more than 30 days, we follow up with drawing down on their deposit and then presenting them with a letter asking them to restore the deposit within 10 days. If tenants go even further and get up to 60 days or more, then we sometimes consult our legal services and take action against the tenant. Any major changes to the rental rates at this point would adversely impact the airport's budget. We do leave some wiggle room in our budget because we do have vacancy rates that vary over a period of time. But on the whole, we feel that having looked at the current market situation, the way that the current policies are functioning, and I think justifiably based on the small number of late payers that we have, and the historic CPI adjustment, that no real change to those policies is indicated at this time. The current rental market is just such an aberration that it doesn't make sense at this point to make major changes based on it. These were the comparables that we've had for the 5-week period that we studied prior to coming to you with these recommendations. As you can see, the airport is still slightly below the Goleta market on all ranges. Goleta office rates over the past 5 weeks were $1.54 per square foot. The airport average is about $1.43. Industrial R&D, Goleta's at $1.08. The airport's about $1.04. Warehouse space is at 74 cents, and the airport's at 63. There really are not any land comps in Goleta that are similar to the spaces that the airport has. There was nothing on the market in the way of land during the time that we did this study. The airport's average land rate is at 14 cents for unpaved land and 17 for paved. Current asking rates with new tenants are 15 cents for unpaved and 20 cents for paved. The UCSB economic forecast from 2008 had Goleta offices at $1.75 and industrial spaces at $1.20. However, the airport, as I mentioned, has received several notices of price reductions on nearby vacant properties, indicating that there's still a gap between the asking and actual rental rates in Goleta. Part of that is also attributable to the fact that about half of the vacant properties, commercial industrial properties in Goleta, are over 10,000 square feet, and several are over 30,000 square feet. And those properties are much more difficult, obviously, to lease. These are the proposed rates for the fiscal year 2009-2010. These are the same rates that we were adopted in 2008 under the current economic situation. We feel that the top end of the rates still give us enough room to make our rental adjustments should the economy start to recover, and that at this point it's prudent to maintain the rates where they are. So our recommendation tonight is that we maintain the rental rates at fiscal year 2008 levels for fiscal year 2010 and continue the current policies for setting rental rates, rental adjustments, and the collection of delinquent accounts. Do you have any questions?
Questions?
One question. Have we heard if the Dodge dealership is going to be continued on?
They are trying really hard. They're currently have been selected by Chrysler to carry on.
Okay.
But as you know, the situation with Chrysler is still in flux. So until they have a firmer commitment from Chrysler, I don't think at this point we really have that information.
Other than, no, actually, we did meet with Jim Crook, the dealership manager, and discussed at length the Chrysler situation and his current operation on the airport, and he's waiting for financing to open up as part of the bankruptcy settlement. So he's hopeful, but at this point he doesn't have any additional information other than he made the cut from, he wasn't included in the 780 dealerships to be lost. So
Very good. Thank you.
we'll stay on it, though.
Other question? I have one question. Your current, for the most recent vacancy rate reports we have list the land vacancy of about 1.6% and buildings 2.1%, which is great as you presented in the paper. I was just curious of the non-used, currently unused property that you have, assets, buildings, land. What percentage roughly is currently considered non-rentable, meaning it's not reflected in the vacancy rate? You know, there's various buildings that have been moved to the unrentable list. You have a rough idea what that would be?
You know, I have not done that calculation, but I can do that and get that information to the board.
I guess it would be interesting to know roughly what that percentage is and characterize why those assets are currently unrentable. What makes them unrentable? Are they not suitable for habitation, or were they in line for or in the way of some other project?
I think the largest portion, and certainly in terms of the buildings, would be the Mar hangar, the large hangar on the other side of Hollister. And that hangar originally was scheduled to be torn down or moved as part of the development of Parcel 22, which has been sort of an ongoing up and down sort of thing. And in anticipation of that, we removed the tenants and went ahead and had all the asbestos removed from the building. Since the building was not necessarily slated to continue, the asbestos contractor was not particularly careful. And there are also some issues with condition of the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, a number of things that would have to be brought up to date were we to try to rent that building. And the costs would be in the millions of dollars. And right now, our emphasis, of course, is on building the new terminal. So if at some future date we decided to change the status of that building, it would be a significant airport project.
Understand?
And I would say, correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the buildings that are unusable, there aren't that many, but most of them are on the north side, and particularly in that Parcel 22 area. I can think of one building on south of Hollister, near, just east of Stratman, that's partially outside the air operations area and partially in the air operations area. And we currently use part of that building for storage, but in the past we have had tenants in there, but the building is in really poor condition. We'd have to spend quite a bit of money to update it.
Great. Any other questions?
Is there a reason we're keeping the building on the north side of Hollister?
You mean the hangar?
Yeah.
I think at this point, trying to find out really what the future of the property is. If it looks like we're not going to develop the remainder of that parcel for 10 years, or I'm just making this up, it might be worthwhile to put some money into it, get it back to usable condition. Other than that, we've had, if we want to take it down, we have had a couple people that are interested in dismantling it and then reconstructing it elsewhere because it is such a great building underneath. I guess the bones of it are pretty good.
Okay, we have a recommendation to approve the proposed fiscal year 2009-10 in the commercial industrial rental rates for land and buildings effective July 1, 2009, and also to concur with the continuation of airport policies and procedures regarding the establishment of rental rates, annual rental rate adjustments, and delinquencies. Do we have
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the recommendation carries. I'd like to, at this point, just go off agenda and recognize that we've been joined by our liaisons and to see if either of our liaisons have anything to report. Mr. Councilmember House.
Well, nice to join you, and thank you for that. Just very briefly, the City Council, in considering the proposed budget for the coming year, reviewed and tentatively has unanimously sent back to our staff the what was proposed to us with some changes, and that's going to be coming back to us again here on the 23rd. We'll be looking to finalize that budget. I didn't see any changes really to the requested or anything with regards to the airport, and the airport's report seemed to go over pretty well. So we're looking forward to having that concluded with a balanced budget in time for the end of the fiscal year. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Good job.
Thank you.
And Councilmember Easton.
My report will be just as gripping as Grant's. I cannot report that our current negotiations over New City Hall that might bring us closer to the airport have reached a definitive point yet. Hopefully that will happen this summer, and we'll let you know as soon as it does. I also would report that the Goleta City Council has not taken any actions at this point regarding land use on airport property that might be of interest to both our bodies, but we have taken no action, and there's none planned. I believe that the airport is doing pretty well by its own self, and we may not need to, hopefully. And that's all I can say.
Well, that's great to hear. I guess if you're looking for City Hall headquarters, there's a big hangar over there. Needs a little work.
It's got really good bones.
I live in a house that was built in Old Town Goleta by the man that married the widow of Clinton Kellogg. And he bought 50 feet of land, so he didn't have to put his house for his bride on his in-laws' property. And I suspect we're kind of the same sort of... Thank you very much.
Well said.
Okay, item 11, a presentation on the World War II Memorial Dedication Ceremony.
I thought this evening, since some of you were not able to attend the dedication of our World War II memorial, that I'd show you a slideshow of the photos that we took from the memorial. It turned out to be a really great day. I think a really nice event. I think that people who were families of the local aviators whose names were listed on the memorial, as well as families and the few people that served here on the airport during World War II when it was a Marine Corps Air Station, were very touched and appreciative of the memorial. And it was fun to see all these people in uniforms, and I'm not sure how some of them could... I mean, I couldn't fit into something I wore when I was 20 years old, so... but it was, I think it was really a good event, and Commissioner Tracy was there, and so he may have his own comments, so... Let's see, let's start this. The idea for the memorial started over 10 years ago. As we were planning for the future of the airport, it kind of dawned on me that, some of the streets may go away at some point in the future. And the streets of the airport, as you know, are named after local aviators that died during World War II. And by local, I mean that they were either born and raised here or came here at some point during their youth and enlisted in the service here. Also, the buildings on the airport for large part, are still the same buildings that we used, that they used during World War II as a base. And eventually those buildings would go away, and I just didn't want anybody to be forgotten. This is going a little faster than me. So that's kind of how the idea for the memorial came about. We worked with a group from the Marine Corps League that worked with us through the kind of concept development, location. We batted around ideas about what the monument should look like. I think initially kind of their vision was something more similar to the Washington, D.C. size memorial, but and it was very heartfelt. I mean, I think that, that's kind of where they were coming from, but looking on what land we had available to do it, we kind of downsized and I think came up with a kind of a tasteful compromise. Jeff McKee, our environmental specialist, took project lead for this project. It has nothing to do with his normal day-to-day work, but he did take it on. Can you stop it for a minute? It has a life of its own here. And shepherded the project through, did a lot of research. Once we realized that there were more local aviators that died during World War II than were on our street names. And part of that came to my attention by a gentleman who named David Peck, who's from San Diego. His uncle was Clifford Peck, and he was a local guy who grew up here and joined the service and died during World War II as an aviator. And so he was interested in his uncle's name being on a street or something. So we did a lot of research and came up with a lot more names, and I'm glad that we've included them. And we've left room for 3 more in case some surface that we didn't know about. David Black, landscape architect, was the architect for the project. The concept of the design was to be simple, respectful, and the space be kind of a contemplative space, as contemplative as you can be at the end of a runway. But I think the space does give you that feeling when you go there. And I've been back over to the memorial several times since in the evening, and there are couples that are there looking at all the names and the squadrons that served at this base during World War II. So I think that came off really well. Alliance Contracting was the contractor, and Carnivale and Lohr were the granite, they created the granite obelisk. The construction site was at Vista Point, which is just east of the long-term parking lot. The obelisk there was shaped off-site. It's one piece of granite, and it weighs 3 tons. Each bench that you'll see in a moment that's around the memorial weighs about 800 pounds. And then there's a flagstone kind of floor or paving around it, and then it leads off across the driveway to some signage that talks about the base as you look over the airfield. Let's see. Yeah, I can go on here. And there's David Black, the landscape architect on the right, and Mr. Carnivale, who installed the granite. After it was done, and just the week before the ceremony, we had the obelisk was covered up, and we had some skateboarders come over and skateboard on the benches, which then had to be rubbed out and fixed, and but we haven't had any issues since then. So this is one side of the obelisk that talks about the Marine Corps Air Station that was here. There are 3 flags, of course, the American flag, California flag, and the Marine Corps flag, and we had to make sure we had the absolute correct Marine Corps flag. And this is Sandy Dietz, our maintenance coordinator. These aren't normal flag poles with normal ways you tie it, so she was trying to get it up, work it up. And our program, which you each have in front of you. And then preparation for the ceremony. This is Terry trying to fit a large tent canopy in that little Vista Point. We were expecting between 250 and 300 people, and about 250 came. It was quite interesting since we had that day moved, or was it that day or a few days before, had moved the short-term lot into the long-term lot. So there was that confusion going on. The new pay-on-foot equipment didn't work, and we had passengers trying to get into long-term. So it was quite interesting. This is the event site. Getting ready. John Blankenship from the Pierre Clysons Museum and Library provided a Jeep and then a model Corsair. These are airport staff greeting people. And that's Jeff McKee, who is the project lead. And that's Brigadier General Frederick Lopez on the left. And he is not related to our Frederick Lopez Street, or that person, but he believes he was named after him. General Lopez was born in Santa Barbara, and his dad was a friend of our Frederick Lopez. That's John Blankenship on the right, and the gentleman in the center, let me find my notes here, is Sergeant Major Robert Fortes. He served in the U.S. Army in World War II, Korea, and Vietnam, and he earned 5 Purple Hearts. It's the gentleman in the center. So we had some very distinguished veterans in attendance.
You started with the 82nd Airborne all the way through Europe.
Oh, thank you. If you know some of these people when we go through, and I don't know all of the people in uniform, so if you know, let me know. We will find out. It's Ernie Sanchez on the left. He was part of our organizing committee and worked with us all the way from the inception of the project. And that's Bill Stewart on the right. He was from the Vietnam Veterans of America. And that's Brigadier General Lopez. And that's one of the signs that displays what it looked like here during World War II. And then you look over the airfield and theoretically can kind of see how things were at that time. That's Captain Ken Linder on the left. He served here during World War II at the base. He was a Corsair pilot, and he was also a decorated pilot. I was trying to think of the... And he was very thrilled to have the recognition for the veterans. That's his family. And we'll just move along. And the other gentleman that we haven't introduced yet is Bill Redding. He's also with Marine Corps League, and he was also in on the planning all along. The lady on the right, or left, I'm sorry, is Bert Curtin.
Dear friend.
She is very sweet. She
Still
joined.
fits in her uniform.
Yes, very well. She joined the Marines during World War II, served on the East Coast as an air traffic controller. And she told me her wish is to be able to go up into our tower and take a tour. So I told her to give me a call. We had lots of media there. The gentleman on the left is from UCSB ROTC. Pat Schenk, who is between me and Ernie Lopez, was also in on the planning from the inception of the project. Of course, our Mayor of Goleta, Roger Aceves. And I don't know who this gentleman is. That's Clifford Peck, and that is the local aviator who died during World War II, whose nephew contacted me. His family came, his brothers and his aunt, and they were there in full force. There they are. They came all the way from San Diego. Bill Stewart. And Tim Lawton, our community education liaison, acted as master of ceremonies. We had to do a lot of, well, actually, mostly Tim did, a lot of research on the protocol for a memorial dedication, a military memorial dedication. There's a lot of different steps or different things that you need to do in a certain order, and to not have a misstep. You know, the color guard. And that's the memorial with each of the military groups in the area provided a wreath and put around the memorial. And then during the ceremony, the representative from each organization was called up, and they went up and saluted their wreath. And Supervisor Salud Carbajal, who was a Marine, also presented a certificate for the dedication. Dave Gonzalez, the gentleman in the sunglasses, was a former police officer, but he also is a terrific singer, and he did the Star Spangled Banner. A cappella, I might say. And I think General Lopez was reminding Tim of something he forgot.
One more thing.
And our city administrator, Jim Armstrong, and Councilmember Williams. The gentleman in the foreground with his back to you is a veteran, also Marine, I think Marine Corps. Ken Linder. We also had, we tried to separate the ceremony into a part that recognized the squadrons that served here on the Marine Corps Air Station, and then part of the ceremony to the aviators, the local aviators that died during World War II, and their individual names are on the monument. These are local high school student body presidents from Santa Barbara High, San Marcos High, and Dos Pueblos that took turns reading the names of all the aviators on the monument. And here, Captain Linder is being escorted to lay the wreath for the ceremony. This is Lucky Hawkins. I understand that he turned the lights out. He was with the last crew that was here when the base closed, and so essentially he turned the lights out before he left, and they closed the base. Memorial with all the wreaths. And these are the representatives from each of the veterans groups saluting the wreath. Pat Shank. She looked terrific in her uniform, I must say. And we had a 21-gun salute. We weren't sure that we would be able to have one up to the last moment because it was just before Memorial Day weekend, and the ammunition that they used for that was in low supply since there were many ceremonies going on in Southern California. But we got a group. And we had a bugler who played taps. Oops. We also, the Pierre Clyson's Museum and Library and John Blankenship arranged to have a Corsair flown here from Chino, the Plains of Fame, and what was the other aircraft? Scott, do you remember? The other aircraft
The
that
T-28?
was T-28. Thank you. So that was just sent chills up and down you. It was wonderful. Corsair. And that's Dr. Peck. And of course, our mayor and Bert. The lone ranger back there. I sort of felt after so many years of working with the group for the memorial that they were kind of like my Marines. I wasn't, even though my dad served during World War II, I wasn't necessarily versed in military background. But
I know several of these Marines because I coordinate the Toys for Tots Marine Corps Reserve program. And so I work closely with them every year.
So you know them well.
I do.
They're great people.
And they are some true characters.
Yes, they are. And those are our students. They told me that they were very honored to be considered, to read the names and pleased to be part of the ceremony. I was really touched by them. I think they took it very seriously. And those are Sea Cadets. And Dave Gonzalez. John Blankenship driving off with his Jeep. And the Peck family. General Lopez. And his mom. And his wife. And Pat and Bert. Do you know? I don't want to say. been the aircraft parked over on the former Forest Service ramp, and people could go over there and go inside the gate and look at the aircraft. And how many did you say were there? About 30?
Yeah, I would say 25, 30
Good people. And I guess the pilot of the Corsair had such a good time that he came back for the D-Day anniversary. Oops. And there's Ken Linder. And that's it. If you have time, I encourage you to go over there and see it. It's, I think it's really wonderful. And I went over at night last week, and it's very well lit, and it looks really nice.
Well, thank you for that great presentation of really a wonderful project to preserve our history and recognize and honor those aviators. It's a really wonderful thing.
It was very
I wanted
fun.
to thank you and the staff for all the work you did. Excuse me. I was very honored to be there and share that with my 11-year-old daughter and explain to her that she was witnessing history. I really think it's going to be a great asset to the airport and the city.
I do too.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So next up, the director's report.
Which you've all been waiting for. Our passenger count for May, sad to say, was down about it was down 13.6% compared to May of 2008. This is not a surprise. I mean, we've been expecting to have a decrease this year. I think we're fortunate. Other airports have had a decrease in their passenger counts for over a year now, and it's just now hitting us. And we're down year-to-date 12.9%. So we'll just take advantage of the less passengers to get some construction work done and try and use it positively. Our new FISVA website will have a presentation for you in July, and it's very near completion. I looked at some aspects of it today that they were trying to get the company that's creating it to do the kind of final draft, if you will, and then we'll take a look at it staff-wise and make sure things are correct and bring it to you, and then go online for about 2 weeks before we really publicize it a lot, just to make sure all the kinks are out and it's working properly. Airline terminal project, if you haven't been over there, I don't know if I'd encourage you to, but you might want to go over there. The loop road has been altered, and there's a construction fence now up where the short-term lot used to be. We're working out the signage. There was signage that was, planned as part of the change in the roadway, but as you work through it and see how the public uses the roadway and how they use the whole grounds, we have additional signage that we need and some additional lighting in areas. It's different. The hairpin turn to me was, the curve came before I sort of expected it to. When you see something on a drawing, it's much different. But people seem to be adjusting to it, and like I said, we're kind of working out the kinks as we get comments from the public or just our own staff kind of uses the facility and sees where it needs improvement. So then the next step will be the contractor will start working on conditioning the soil for where the kind of building pad will be, and then their work, this phase of work should be done probably in August or early September, and then the next contractor will come on and actually start the new building. So it's pretty exciting. to actually see it underway. Let's see. Also, our consolidated rental car quick turnaround facility, the photovoltaics are up in the parking lot, the parking lot shade structures, I guess you call them, with the photovoltaics on top. If you have a chance, you might want to drive over there on Love Place and take a look at that. The landscape contractors brought pots of plants and on site, so they're getting near completion, and it should be complete in August. So we're getting there on that one. So that's a pretty exciting project as well. And I think that's the only things I wanted to point out. If you have other things on the director's report that you'd like me to address, I'd be happy to.
Perhaps we could have an update on the bond sale project.
I'll let Ms. Johns.
It went in a heartbeat. Bonds closed on June 10th, and I understand they opened in the morning, and before lunchtime, practically all but $4 million had been sold. Morgan Stanley accepted that $4 million, and pretty much by end of day, that $4 million was gone too. So it went very quick. Interest rate was 5.12%, I believe.
5.15.
15.
Right.
And the funds have been deposited in the account, and we're ready to spend. So it went really well.
That's great.
Excellent. And that's with the financing of the quick turn facility pulled out of that.
That's correct.
Right.
Right. That was financed
Yeah.
through the city as a long-term investment for the city at a very comfortable interest rate.
Any other question? Okay. Well, with that, and reminding everyone to fly free.